Hello and welcome to the Built in the Bronx podcast. I'm your host, Maximilian Hill, and today we have a very special guest. Jason Mays serves as the web AI lead at Google, where he is a 13-year veteran. He has 20 plus years of engineering experience, and he is what he refers to as a rare breed of the creative engineer. He's got an incredible introduction video, which he's going to share with us now.
We're thrilled today to welcome Jason Mays. He helps web engineers around the globe take their first steps with machine learning and JavaScript.
We spoke about Jason wing walking.
Hello everyone, I'm Jason Mays, webinar lead here at Google.
This is what we want to bring to all of you. You can be the dreamer to harness the power of AI and solve problems and build solutions that help us all.
He also combines his knowledge of the technical and creative worlds to develop innovative prototypes for Google's largest customers and internal teams with over 15 years of experience in investigating emerging technologies.
What an incredible video.
Thank you very much.
Tell me, how did you put that together? Or who did you work with to put that together?
It was just myself. I was bored on the weekend and decided to learn some new skills, honestly. So I thought it'd be fun to learn how to edit videos properly. And well, you know, you've got to use your own content, right? So I figured, why not make a teaser reel for the last year and just show what I've been up to? Yeah.
That was great. I think, especially for someone who's doing podcast appearances on the speaking circuit, I think that's going to be incredibly useful. So
Awesome.
So you and we met at the beautiful offices of Google, I think on the west side of Manhattan, and just kept in touch, and really excited to have you here on the Built in the Bronx podcast. I think, the students that we support here at Lehman College are really interested in hearing about your experience, and you are, a tech leader. You're on the cusp of the edge of the innovation, and we couldn't be happier to have you here. So
thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
Yes. So tell us, 13 years at Google. Tell us a little bit
very
about
fast.
Tell us a little bit about your journey at Google.
So yeah, I mean, I guess just rewinding just a little bit. Before Google, I was in some startups essentially as well. So, given the nature of our audience today, I'd like to talk a bit about making decisions in life as well, because, I was at university studying computer science back in the old days. And, in the final year, you start to look for jobs and things like this. And I actually ended up signing a contract with an investment bank. And turns out when I went to their orientation day, I was not a big fan of the environment there. And so I decided to quit on that first day. And I had no backup plans. I had student debts and loans and all that kind of stuff. And, it's quite a scary moment in one's life to, make such decisions at that age. So, but, sometimes you've got to if something feels off, you need to follow what you believe in as well, right? So I ended up going back to Bristol, which is where my university was back in the day. And I was like, okay, well, let's reset, find something else to try and do. And I ended up working for a semiconductor startup called Exmos. I was their lead web engineer back then as 15th employee, and got to wear many hats there, essentially, from all their web engineering and design to creating 3D models in Autodesk Maya, and even photography skills being learned, and videography and that kind of stuff, just to help them get grow and be a well-known brand for the semiconductor side of things. So that was really cool for learning a lot of stuff very quickly. And then I formed my own company alongside that. So 9 till 5, I was doing the semiconductor job. 5 to 11 p.m, I was doing my own company. I did that for about a year, starting to get a little burnt out. But I was like, okay, now I've got customers. It's a chance to now go full time to that. But just at that moment, Google found me due to my page rank for web engineer in the UK back then. and they invited me to join them as a web engineer at Google. So I joined a team called Innovation Services, and they focused on creating advanced technical components that our advertisers and creatives could use to bring rich media ads to life using HTML5 components and various computer vision techniques and stuff like that to make advanced things that everyone else can then use easily, essentially. So that was interesting, learning about like the front end, the back end, all the scalable systems at Google, that kind of stuff. But I realized in my 20% time, which is famous at Google, where you get 1 day a week to work on things you're more interested in outside of your day job, my passion was really there. So starting with blank canvases and making things that had never been made before. And I got the opportunity to do this thing called a rotation with a team in San Bruno under the YouTube headquarters at Google. So I did 3 months with them, and I basically was tasked with investigating emerging technologies like machine learning back then in the day, and also like AR, VR, new sensors and the hardware, that kind of stuff. And I had to kind of use those to make prototypes for our largest customers, like all the big brands you could think of, and then bring their story to life somehow using those technologies. Now, this was a really interesting role because the things I had to come up with never existed before. So you're working with a lot of unknowns. There's no examples that you can Google for the answer because the answer doesn't exist, or often perceived to be impossible to do or pull off with the technology of the time. And about 5 years later, we'd see startups doing the things we were proposing 5 years before. So, we're roughly working about 5 years ahead of the game at that time. So that was a really interesting role. Eventually, they got reorged with the internal politics and stuff, and I ended up on a team called TensorFlow.js, representing them as their developer relations engineer, where I got to combine my love for web engineering, my kind of founding stuff back in the day, with my curiosity for AI and going deeper on that stack. Over the last 4 years, I now lead web AI at Google, which is the art of taking machine learning models and running them client-side in the web browser on your device. So that gives you like privacy, low latency, and low cost, that kind of benefit essentially, versus cloud AI, which is the kind of opposite of that. So yeah, basically that's what I lead now, and that's basically my career to date. So yeah,
that's incredible. I think someone told me what the smartest people are working on weekends is what everyone will be doing in 5 years, and that basically, that was the quote that came to mind when you were just going through, you see these technology come out in 5 years. Like I proposed that, right? So really interesting. Emerging technology is such a fascinating field. I just got back from the World Blockchain Summit in Dubai, and I think really opened my eyes to the industry and some of the emerging technologies. And they're not, the whole industry is not crooked. Yes, there are some crooked people, but there are a lot of really interesting use cases that don't get the same headlines as some of the negative headlines. I think one of them said, people are going to use blockchain to bring financial services to 70% of the third world who don't have basic financial services like checking accounts, direct deposits, or ATMs. And, you think about those numbers, I mean, it's astronomical, the number of people that can be helped. Now, I'm not a blockchain expert. I've taken a couple of courses, but I I lean on my students, to be honest with you. Sure. But I do think we need to keep an open mind. I mean, change is scary for a lot of people, but emerging technologies is where it's at these days. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity to be explored there. Good to cut through some of the hype sometimes, but if you can identify the fundamentally good bits about it and leverage that to go further, then it can be very useful. And not many times in your life you'll get the opportunity to be at the beginning of something. I'm old enough to remember when the web came out, and actually embracing that gave me an advantage. And the same is happening with AI and other things right now. So if you choose wisely and pick your battles wisely, you might have a good edge in the future.
Yeah. I also, when I was coming out, I was interested in investment banking and didn't really like the environment. And it's not the best work-life experience. So I can relate to you on that for sure.
Yeah.
So also, you I'm an aviation aficionado.
Awesome.
Aficionado. I love anything, flight related. For a little while in high school, I was debating becoming a pilot, and I actually visited.
Awesome.
I actually visited the Air Force Academy on an official visit, and ended up getting rejected because I didn't meet their standard. They have very high standards as far as SAT scores, and because it's not just the military, you're actually going to be an officer in the military. So I came close, but never actually pursued that. But I have done several skydives. And
Awesome.
when we first met, you shared your video of you. Now this guy has done a wing walk on a plane that's actually flying. So tell me about this, and if you don't mind, share the video with us.
Yeah, so I guess like yourself, actually, I wanted to be in the Royal Air Force. I'm from England originally, so I wanted to be in the Royal Air Force when I was a teenager. And for various reasons, it didn't work out for me either. So I took it upon myself that, little by little, I wanted to try every form of flying myself. Like, screw you, I'll do it myself. So basically, that became my hobby, essentially. And, I didn't grow up with the strongest kind of foundations in life, a very poor situation growing up. So I couldn't do much at the beginning. But through university, I was able to do hot air ballooning for £15 only back in the day, because you'd just pay for the fuel. You would help put the balloon together and everything. So it's all on you to help out. But you can get the price right down. So that's how I started my flying adventures, I guess, back then. And then little by little, I was looking for more interesting things that are outside of the normal. So after I'd done my first flying lesson in a plane and then a helicopter or whatever, it's okay, what else is there to do? And of course, at some point, someone suggested, oh, have you done wing walking yet? I was like, what's that? And then, of course, it's this old sport that goes back to the 1920s. And I was like, oh, that seems pretty cool. But I put it off for a long time because, you got to weigh up the risks and everything at the same time too, right? So an opportunity arose, but I was in the right place at the right time, and I had a slot available. I was like, okay, if I'm not going to do it now, I'm never going to do it. So I just signed up for it, and I did the training. I did about 4 hours of training on the morning, and they teach you how to walk about the plane and safely, always having 3 points of contact and that kind of stuff. And then went up and climbed about and did the aerobatics and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely a life-changing experience. And I believe, unfortunately, that was the last wing walking school in the world to teach this sport. And I believe they're no longer able to teach right now. So I might be one of the last wing walkers in the world. I might be a cool granddad one day with one of those historical photos of what those people in the old days used to do. But I think it's good to pursue your dreams like that. A lot of the things that people do these days, they delegate the risk to others. So let's take paragliding, for example. You're basically sitting on someone else's lap who's doing all the work for you. When you actually do something like wing walking, it's on your head to climb out the cockpit of the airplane at 3,000 feet and start walking about. There's no one to help you up there. And actually realizing that and doing things for yourself and not delegating risk and not owning it, I think is a really big learning experience as a human. And it's something in various forms people should try more of, whatever that thing might be. But it really helps you grow as a person as well, I think, to own it. So that was a interesting life experience. I actually describe it as peaceful and calming. You knew exactly where you were in the world. You're this tiny little speck flying through the clouds, and you can see everything below you. It's you feel very present in the moment, and it's very interesting.
Yes. When I've done my skydives, that's exactly how I would describe it. Peaceful and almost like a surrender. When you're approaching the moment, I've done my research. It's actually statistically very safe. Yeah. And you just kind of surrender to the moment. And it was a life-changing experience for me, for sure. Definitely. So speaking about, were you afraid on the wing walk? I think when I arrived, I was nervous, but after all the training, I was so focused on my muscle memory of all the moves I wanted to do, you kind of forget about that. It's you're so focused on what you're doing. So no, when I was up there, no. Before watching everyone else go, I was like, oh, when's it going to be my turn? Then of course, at that point, of course, you're going to have some nerves, but
when you're in the moment, you're just completely focused because you're going about 80 miles an hour when you're climbing out, and then 150 miles an hour when you're doing the aerobatics and things like that. So you're more focused on just doing what you need to do than anything else. Yeah.
Speaking of fear, I think you are also a speaker, a public speaker.
Yes.
And so I never stop trying to push public speaking on our students because I think it's such a valuable skill. No matter what you want to do, whether you want to be a lawyer, whether you want to be an engineer, an investment banker, or even if you just want to be a nanny, whatever it is, it's something that's universal. And in these days where job security is very tenuous, I think transferable skills are really a great area for anyone to kind of, protect their career, right? And make sure that they're in demand. So tell us about your public speaking skills and how you manage because I think it's like there are some people who say they're more afraid of public speaking than deaf. And you think about that, it's completely illogical, But tell us about how you become such a great speaker.
So I'm an engineer at heart. My background is computer science and stuff like that. We're typically not the most outgoing of people. In fact, I'm an INTJ on the Myers-Briggs test. I'm an introvert. So I hated public speaking initially. I did not like it. My first few attempts going on stage, my legs were wobbling and all shaky and nervous and heart going 1,000 beats per second and all that kind of business, right? But it just comes down to practice, really. And you have to realize that the people you're speaking to, most of the time, are just there to enjoy your talk, and like you make up stuff in your head a lot of the time, like, oh, why is that person yawning, or why is that person like looking at their phone, and you think you get worried that you're boring or something on stage, but you soon realize that, oh, that person just had a crazy night out last night, and that guy's got work to do that his manager's pinging him for in the middle of the conference, and you soon realize that it's nothing personal. And when you realize that, you kind of calm down a little bit, and you're like, hold on a minute, okay, I just need to deliver a good performance and make it easier for people to follow along and that kind of stuff. So, I've given like over 150 talks now, I think, and I'm now much more confident going on to various stages. It's quite strange. I find the small-ish ones with a very specific audience more nerve-wracking than a stage of like 3,000 because they're like little tiny blobs in the audience. You can't even see when it's that large. You've got all the big lights on you. It's hard to see. They're just like silhouettes. It's actually better sometimes in that way versus a more intimate thing where you know who these people are and they're like maybe very senior people. You're trying to represent yourself well or whatever it might be. So, I think your opinions on these things change in terms of bigger stages are easier and also your confidence just grows by practicing. And you can learn different techniques, especially when you're early on, like using the podium as like a way of supporting yourself if you are a bit nervous is a good way to do like a power pose and like get some confidence back in yourself. And often after you've done the first 2 minutes of talking, you get into the flow and you actually then forget your nerves and things like that. So it's the first 2 minutes that are really the on edge bit, and then you can get into the flow. So once you get over that a few times, you learn how to do that quicker and quicker and quicker, and you become more confident, right? But there is no golden rule here other than practice, in my opinion. I think, especially for someone, if you're like me, who is an introvert, then you just have to put a lot of practice in. And I realize the importance of doing that because, especially over here in America, very different to England and Europe where I'm from originally, it's very much you need to present yourself well to get noticed and all that kind of stuff. So if you're going to start a startup, you can have the best product in the world, but if you can't pitch it well, competently, and ask questions in the moment, like you'll be, it's a separate subject, but how to, respond to the audience at the end when you don't know what they're going to ask and getting hairy questions sometimes. Like you got to like figure out how to deal with those situations and. These are good skills to have just generally. These are transferable skills. So, yeah.
Yes. I think earlier in my career, I really struggled with presentations. And I mean, when I was in high school, I was actually the lead of my the high school play my senior year. So I had some experience with it. But I think during 2020, I asked one of my mentors, I said, what should I be doing right now? And he said, pick a skill, right? And then just hone it, you're right. And I was like, okay, I want to get better at public speaking. So I joined a Toastmasters group, and I actually dabbled with stand-up comedy, which is really terrifying.
That's a hard one to do.
And it's not only is it terrifying, it's very hard, very difficult.
You got to read the audience well to know, what type of jokes they're gonna like and stuff, right? So,
and you have to be nimble, because you can't, like, you have to have a plan, but you can't like hold too tightly to it, because the audience doesn't care about your plan. So
it's a little similar, not as quite as extreme as that, but it's a little similar presenting, because you've got to read the audience to some level, and if you realize that, okay, these are people who really know their stuff, you want to up the game in how you're describing things technically. Maybe if you realize it's more of a beginner audience, you want to like make it simpler for them to understand. You might have to adapt in the moment sometimes. So not quite stand-up comedy, but like adapting in the moment is very a good skill to have.
Yes. And what my mentor said was the best public speakers are comedians. So I'm not looking to pursue a career in comedy, but if I can learn something from them that can help me in my life and career, then all the better. So you mentioned that you had some humble background, that you had a humble background. Lehman is part of the City University of New York, which I think is ranked as the #1 university in the country as far as social mobility. Which, let's face it, these days it's an issue, because it's becoming harder and harder for young people to find opportunities. So if you don't mind, would you mind speaking about your humble beginnings and how you kind of rose up and beat the challenges of
obviously everyone's circumstances are different. I'm not saying mine's like the worst or the whatever, but like I didn't have too much growing up in terms of things. I had to go to university a year later because I didn't have enough money to pay for university. My parent couldn't do that, so I ended up working for a year. Actually, my first job was at my high school. I was the head of network security at my high school, and they brought me in to do that after I hacked their database. So they went, "Oh, you seem to be good at this. Maybe we should hire you as a head of network security." So
that's a good choice.
So basically, I used that as a stepping stone to earn some money whilst paying the bills back home with my mum, and then had enough, with a little help from some family as well, to then get to university. And whilst at university as well, I often had like 1 or 2 side jobs on at the same time. I always try to keep it relevant, so the skills I'm learning complement future career choices, even if it's not the exact thing I want to do right now. The skills I learn will complement other things I might want to do later. So I did I was a lab demonstrator for the first years of a university course, for example, where they paid me some money to teach the first years how to code, and I was a second year or third year, that kind of stuff. And or I found like a web design company and just offered my services there for quite low costs, I guess, at the time. But it was a stepping stone and allowed me to build my portfolio and that kind of stuff. Because often when you graduate, you struggle with like having enough experience and portfolio kind of side of things. So it's important to keep building that up so you stand out a little bit more than someone you might be competing with in that situation, right? So I also did a lot of charitable work. That also is a great way to get exposure with like global brands or national brands, and they often are understaffed and need help. So if you've got some certain skills that you can offer to those people, it might not seem like you're I find, especially in America, people are not willing to give away things for free. And I find this very weird, because sometimes it's a mutually beneficial situation where you do this thing for free for them, but in return, people see that, oh, you made that site or you did that thing, when people ask them, and that actually creates opportunities later. Some of my work for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in the UK ended up being featured on the BBC or something, and whilst they didn't explicitly mention my name in that piece, when people were like, "Oh, who made the website?" the founder would be like, "Oh yeah, check out this guy from wherever," and so it created opportunities and things like that. So I think it's good to just be part of the community generally, and kind of give back where you can, and do all that kind of stuff too. Which is kind of why I do developer relations now. It's nice to give back a little bit, not just do the engineering stuff and hide away, but teach what I've learned and help people not make the same mistakes that I did. So yeah.
And everyone makes
Everyone makes mistakes. Yeah,
I think in my experience, the people who have incredible careers have made more mistakes than most, right? And it's just mistakes maybe that don't knock you out of the game completely, right?
Yes. And that's actually back to my upbringing point. I've never been allowed to fail. I've always had to play it a little bit safe. I think there's one regret, but also one thing that's pushed me to where I am today is having that high standard there. So my regret is that I may have overlooked some opportunities because it was a little too risky to do. And if I failed, then, you know, I'd be homeless or something, right? So I had to be very careful. But at the same time, it's also forced me to have a certain standard in the work that I produce to ensure I am confident in delivering on the things that I say that I will do and that kind of stuff. So it's like a double-edged sword. You can use those double-edged swords to your advantage at the right times, I guess. So yeah.
You mentioned something about people not wanting to give away anything for free in the US. And a funny story, when I was the first tech startup I was working at, I was doing business development and I was doing cold calls. And I remember I had been doing calls for a couple of weeks and I was getting frustrated. And I eventually got a meeting on the calendar. I was really excited. And then we got the vice president of sales to come. And I said, you know, we need to bring an engineer because they're going to have engineering questions. And you and I don't have enough experience to really answer them, you know, in a way that is provides any value, right? And he said, no, we're not going to do it because we don't want to give anything away for free. And I said, and he was actually the son of the CEO, right? Yeah. And we had a talk with the CEO, and I actually won the argument, and we were able to bring our engineer to the call. But I remember that when you mentioned that, I was like, man, this guy, you got to give something away for free. I think, you know, here in America, in the malls, they give away those free samples, right? That everyone loves, and you got to give something. But all right, we got some time left. I got some questions from our students, if you don't mind.
Let's go for it.
This question is from Aaliyah Daisy. What coding languages, libraries, or frameworks would you recommend that someone interested in learning more about web AI start to learn more about?
So if it's specifically web AI, then JavaScript is the language of choice. I do not use any frameworks because I'm very purist in my language stuff. I find a lot of people I interview these days say they know JavaScript, but they don't. They know React or Angular. They know the frameworks. And that actually bothers me because you're not learning the language. And the language is the thing that gives you the Lego building blocks to make anything versus being tied to one framework and being limited by that framework. A lot of the stuff that I create at Google are, you know, as I said before, like world first, and they have to be super optimal, very low latency, like minimal file size, that kind of stuff. And if you're adding bloat by using a framework, then, you know, that can be, you know, not beneficial. So, but certain times you might want to do it. If you're working on a project with like over 10,000 lines of code, then maybe it's good to, like, you know, make it a bit more manageable or something with a framework or something like that. But, you know, I think web standards have caught up a lot since the old days when frameworks were needed. So in modern JavaScript, we've got the ability to do imports, we've got templating, we've got custom elements, all these lovely things that you can use that frameworks have tried to provide before they existed. And so a lot of people got into frameworks because there was no alternative. But now with modern JavaScript, there actually is. So I would reassess that. Make sure you know the language inside and out first. That will serve you well so that you can make the framework of tomorrow instead of actually using a framework, make the next one maybe. I think, yeah, you need to differentiate yourself as a computer scientist to be knowing the language well versus using something someone else has made. I think that is the differentiator there versus someone who's more like lower, not lower level, I guess, lower down the stack in terms of actually creating things. So, yeah.
This question is from Salif Tankawano. The average person primarily interacts with AI through chatbots. What other paths are not being explored here by the public?
So chatbots recently have become popular, but before that, we've actually had many other forms of AI models which still exist and are still used, but are drowned out by the hype that is LLMs and things like that. So we've got models that allow you to understand what objects exist in an image, like object detection. We've got models to do body segmentation to understand which pixels belong to a human body. Linked to that, we can do pose estimation to understand like how your pose is with all the joints and the key points on your body, like that. We've got face key point detection to understand like 387 points on the human face to do very accurate facial capturing, that kind of stuff, which you can then use to drive characters or in a game or something like this. Imagine playing a game with your webcam turned on and the game character mimics what you're doing in the real world with facial expressions. You can add that type of capability very easily to game engines and stuff now, using a regular webcam, right? And then we've got the less sexy stuff like tabular data, doing like regression and linear regression, all that kind of stuff on tabular data to understand and predict other cell values, maybe using decision forests and things like this as well, that allow you to work with that kind of stuff, which could be very useful for the finance industry when you're trying to like predict various values there, or just classifying things generally. So we cover the whole range of things there, but like if you search online for common machine learning models, categories or something, you'll probably find all of these kinds of things listed as the examples.
Yeah.
And then we've got even like audio generation, audio recognition, translation. I mean, I could go on all day with the types of models. There's thousands of them. So yeah, don't get hung up on just Gen AI. Gen AI is a buzzword. I think we are slowly realizing what the hype is versus how it can actually be useful. I'm not saying it can't be useful, it can. It's got very good applications, but there's also regular machine learning, which can be a lot smaller in size, a lot less requirements on the hardware to run, and give you maybe even better performance for certain things like, you know, object detection or whatever it might be. If it's like a niche thing you're trying to do, you can get away with less and get more out of it. So yeah, choose wisely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our last question comes from John Alban. How can people be more cautious and aware of AI generated content? Are there any universal signs to tell when something is fake?
I mean, if you asked me this 2 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, you can see the telltale signs in the imagery and stuff. I mean, I think still today, like a lot of the imagery, if you look at the irises of the humans, like they're not perfectly circular, and in nature, it'll be a perfect circle. So little telltale signs like that. But this is getting harder and harder to tell with the human eye. These things are getting perfected and all that. So when it comes down to actually training other machine learning models to detect the algorithmic pixel level differences that your eye won't pick up as a human, but a mathematical model can. So there's active area of research to spot generated content, especially for like imagery and videos, for example, which tends to be the more interesting area that people want to be able to spot. But I think there's a growing need for this, and also like natural language processing kind of stuff where large language model outputs, whereby you got this generated text, like is someone cheating on an exam for a coursework or something, you know, that's becoming more of an interesting thing to look into too. But this is an active area of research, and I think unless you use these things day in and day out, you might not realize. And even if you do use it day in and day out, like these things are getting better and better with time. So today might not be valid tomorrow. They might have fixed all those things so you can't tell the difference anymore visually. So when it comes down to training models to spot these very minute differences in the way that the pixels have been generated, but oh yeah, this is very artificial, it's not organic, because in nature, you got that kind of like analog kind of thing going on where, you know, not everything is digitally created. So therefore there's these natural variations that happen in the color space and spectrums and blah, 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 that might not be perfectly replicated by a generated image. So those things can be picked up on potentially with an AI model that's trained on that. So yeah.
I think that's all the time we've got today. So
no worries.
Just on behalf of our students, just want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, if anyone's got further questions, you can drop a message on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
jasonmays.com, right?
Oh, so actually, yeah, don't go to my website. I need to redo that. That's like 15 years old, so I think it still links to Google Plus on there. So, so yeah, like no, don't use that. But just search my name on LinkedIn is the best way. Honestly, like Twitter's limited by the characters and things. So LinkedIn's probably the best way to actually get my attention if you've got a question. And yeah, either comment on one of my posts or drop me a DM over there and can answer. So yeah.
That's good, Jason. I think some of our students will be reaching out.
Cool.
And hopefully you can be their first connection in their professional networks.
Awesome. Yes. Oh, that's that's an interesting thing. I see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn asking for referrals. I want to just clear this up. Referrals is where someone's putting their reputation on the line for you. So don't ask people for referrals unless they know your work really well and they know you really well. Otherwise, when they're asked to fill out the referral application, what they're going to put, like, oh yeah, this guy just DM me on LinkedIn and like wants a referral. You know, it's actually worse than having a referral in that situation if they've got a reply like that. So yeah, basically make great things, get noticed for it, and then build that trust with that person. And you know, they can then actually speak highly of your work. You know, if you've done a lot of open source projects, that kind of stuff, you know, we can see your level of coding. We can see if it solved problems in the real world for other people. We're doing useful stuff. Yeah, I could recommend that person. But if I don't know you, just coming out of the blue, like, hey, give me a referral. Like, that's not how the world works.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my final piece of advice. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
hope to have you on again in the future. All right.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.